Hello, friends. It's Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden, and I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle and Joy, and I've seen almost nothing.
Except now, you've seen 2 episodes.
2 episodes of Almost Human.
Almost Human, which is the show that I love, which I'm making Danielle watch.
I'm currently also loving it. I also love this show, all 2 episodes of it that I've seen.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Joy is pretending this is news, as if I don't text her after every episode and tell her that I liked it and these are the things I liked.
It's true. We were yelling at each other last time. It was very entertaining. It was just like, I just want to hit next. And it was like, you can't. We have a podcast to record.
We have a podcast called Binge O'Clock. That means you can't binge this show.
That means we can't binge the show. Look, we may change the format if we get to a longer show and maybe we'll watch a few episodes in a night. I feel like that's a natural progression. But for this particular show, we cannot binge it. Must resist the urge to binge. But yes, we are up to episode 2, which is called Skin. And in this episode, Kennex and Dorian investigate the sex industry when a high-end sex bot maker is found dead in a hotel room. And things get weird. It turns out, things get weird so quickly. When it turns out that the sex bots are leaving behind a DNA trail of missing women, and the boys have to find them and save them, as is their wont.
As is their duty, according to the new and improved intro for this show.
Oh, it's true. It's no longer 3 seconds. And 400% is gone. R.I.P.
R.I.P. I'm so upset about it. We're still going to keep talking about it, I guarantee.
Yes. Oh, the 400%. Look, the tech is still there. They didn't do anything to the tech.
No, they did not. But they did do something that has inspired what we'll call the next segment of this show. The police were not prepared.
Not prepared at all for anything that happens, as we'll see. And I do think it shows, which we'll get into later, but the reason that this episode might have been a little later in the telling, but at the same time, you had to have an episode that was so highly tech that you're like, wow, you really weren't prepared, were you? At all.
Dangerous advances did, in fact, alter the criminal landscape. Were you looking for examples of 400%? Here they are.
So, how were the police not prepared this week, Danielle?
Well, I mean, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but part of the reason the police were so unprepared was that all of their old school surveillance tactics and all of their old school investigation tactics until the end of this episode had to be thrown out the window. And I think one of the things that this show does really well is that it isn't always just bigger guns. It isn't always just tanks for everyone. It's what if you couldn't surveil the public anymore? What if you couldn't see people's faces when they showed up on surveillance cams? Hence, and QR Flashmask.
Yes. Oh, it's so perfect. And I think you're right that the show gets way more creative with it than I think I even remembered that they do.
Yeah. What if?
When I was ragging on 400%. It's like, no, but they did something interesting.
Yes, something interesting. Dream bigger. What if there was a bomb that could wipe out all of the DNA at a crime scene? What are you going to do next, police force?
What if we set a DNA bomb, which, yes, there is a DNA bomb, and it goes off, and they can't get any samples, and they don't know who anybody is. And it takes a while for them to actually ID this poor man on the floor. It's a marble that they chuck into the center of the room, and then it explodes into sparkles. And in my brain, I'm going, but what are the sparkles made of? Is it bleach? It could be bleach.
Sparkles of bleach.
Sparkles of bleach, the new DNA bomb for your life.
But you
it's
know
just like
how
cleaning must be so much easier.
So they call this light reflecting mist that everyone sprays on their faces Flashmask, which is smart because it shows up as a flash because the mist just reflects all light instead of absorbing it. And it's so catchy.
It's very catchy.
I wonder whether DNA Bomb originally had a really catchy name as well. Or they wanted it so badly, stop trying to make sparkles of bleach work. It's not working.
Or it could be somebody actually figured out Flashmask, and then they were like, no, that's stupid. But people on the street were already calling it that, and it's like, all right, I guess it's Flashmask.
People on the street.
TM.
Flashmask. TM. So we get the flash mask, we get the DNA bomb, both within probably the first 7 minutes of the show.
Yeah, less than 5, I think.
Yeah, I believe you. And the other thing we get within the first 7 minutes of the show is your all-time favorite, the absorption round.
The absorption rounds. 3rd generation. Which are like, at first I thought the absorption rounds were like, did it absorb some kind of weird ricochet? Because when they are shot at this poor, sad person, he gets shot so many times, and then he flips over the bed, and I'm pretty sure is dead before he hits the ground. And I was going, is that what the absorption round does? And it took me an actual second to be like, oh, it's just like silencers.
It's a silencer. It's a silencer, but it's in the bullet. And I guess that's more effective? Question mark.
Again, this is where you find your 400%. Am I right?
400%.
I mean, 400% less sound.
So
sure.
They can't gather any DNA from the scene. They can't see any faces on the surveillance cams. No one heard the person being killed because they were shot in the chest with these absorption rounds. And last but not least, they cannot track the car that they see leaving the scene because the car has a tag scrambler on it. So really, the police officers are just flummoxed by this entire situation.
The tag scrambler is so great because I remember watching a Bonnie and Clyde thing, or something, and they would have to like ditch the car and get another car. And there would be like, we carry around these extra license plates so that the cops don't find us, you know.
Yes.
And if you could just press a button and change the number on your license plate, you could get away with a lot of stuff.
So much. Wait, now I'm remembering. Now I'm thinking of, like old school in Syndicate folk being like, back in my day, we used to have to drive into a tunnel, unscrew the plate numbers and screw on a new one.
And you crooks today don't know what you're missing. High octane chase, and you just drive into a driveway and turn off all your lights and wait. I mean, what an amazing piece of tech, but also the poor police.
Wildly unprepared.
How do we track it? Why wouldn't every crook have a tag scrambler? Like, why wouldn't you invest in a tag scrambler today?
I mean, every crook does have one, and 400.
Apparently.
That's how you get 400%.
That's how you get 400%. You add them all together. And I do think there's a very cute piece of tech in this episode, which is very tiny. Animatronic toy giraffe.
Oh, goodness. You know, wait, I have to... When you said there was a very cute piece of tech, I thought you were about to go into the hive.
No. We will save the hive.
My brain went to a very strange place. No, the actual cute piece of tech.
Yes, no, there is a very cute piece of tech, and it is a tiny toy giraffe, which Kennex has on top of his computer screen, which definitely feels like one of those little tiny Tinker toys that, I don't know, maybe you get in like a bottom of a Cracker Jack box or something. Mm-hmm. But if you boop his little head, he walks around and does a little dance.
Little giraffe prance. I love it.
Little giraffe dance.
Yep.
Just happy being a giraffe. Boop him again, and he goes back to normal. I just think he's so precious.
So precious. And such a perfect thing to use to bribe a child.
Worst case scenario, find a toy giraffe to bribe your child who witnessed a crime. Works every time.
Works every time.
This episode is just about product placement, let's be real, for our 400% products, which we're going to have to come up with. The show is giving me ideas.
Yes, it is.
But yes, to turn to a darker side of the 400% is something that I sort of dub the hive, because it doesn't really get a name in the show. But the vehicle by which the bad guys are stealing the DNA from these women, it's not explained. Mm-mm. And I'm actually fine that it's not explained. I don't need to know too much more than what I see. But basically, there are these women hooked up to something in the center, which is, for all intents and purposes, stealing their skin and helping to grow animatronic skin for their robots.
Yes, it's like it's keeping the women alive for as long as possible, while their skin is being harvested. And it's somehow, forcing their skin to regrow faster, probably, so that there can be multiple harvests. And I need to stop saying that word now because it is, gross.
It's pretty gross. But when we see it, we do see women in like various levels of skin depletion. And it's hard to watch. It's hard to watch. We don't dwell on it on the episode. We're not going to really dwell on it here. But I've seen this sort of tech before in other sci-fi things, which I think is really interesting. There's like this idea of like people hooked up to something in the center.
Yeah.
Which in my brain gives it a very Beehive-esque thing.
True. So, like in, I don't know, Minority Report, we have that a little bit in the Matrix.
Minority Report.
Right? In the Matrix.
The Matrix definitely had that. I think you see it again in Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, yeah.
There's that one in particular, like, stuck with me just because it's also, like, horrifying when it shows up. Which leads us to these sex bots.
The sex bots.
The sex industry in Almost Human is very hard to pin down.
Yep.
We don't get a lot of information in this episode. I'm pretty sure because it's only 13 episodes long. I think the show doesn't really go into it that deep. There is a level of you want to know more. I mean, I know I personally want to know more because they seem to have set up some kind of checks and balances, some kind of regulation. All sex bots are registered. So I'm like, oh, okay, cool. But we also never talk to a human that would be in a sex bot position.
Right.
I was going to say we don't talk to humans in the sex industry, but that's not true. We talk to pimps.
Yes, we do. But we don't talk to any human sex workers, which I don't even know. I mean, I guess the show doesn't really answer either way. Do humans work as sex workers in the sex industry in this show? We don't really know.
Right. I do wonder if it just was a complete replace.
Yeah.
Which would, on one hand, almost make sense. On the other hand, I feel kind of weird about because there's a part of me that's like, you just put a lot of people out of work.
Yeah.
But of course, there's also another part of me that's like, well, you also have androids on the police force. So I don't know. Are you just not recruiting as many humans?
It's 2048. Right? Maybe other employment opportunities exist. I don't know.
I mean, here's hoping.
Maldonado does go out of her way to say that crime in the sex industry is down 38%. And she says that really all started when the sex bots were introduced to the sex industry.
Right. 38% is not a small number. The part where it's like, it's down 38%. And there's a part of me that's like, what is happening to the robots?
Yeah.
I don't really like the implication of like the crime is down because it's not happening to humans.
Because anything terrible that's done to a sex bot is not technically a crime.
I think that's where we're going with this, especially since everyone in the precinct keeps saying it.
Yes. Everyone I think everyone in the show except for Dorian, of course, and Rudy, one of the good ones. Rudy and Dorian refer to the sex bots using she, her pronouns. Everyone else calls them its. And it's clear that they view them as objects.
100%. And it's very unfortunate. I would have liked to have known more, but of course, this episode is only 42 minutes long.
Right.
They can only cram so much in. I would have been curious to know, would there have been a follow-up? For example, does Lorenzo Shaw come back? Because what a great name.
What a great name.
I love that name. And also we find out that Dorian's tech being in some of these bots, they borrowed from the synthetic soul, but they definitely didn't boot it up completely.
Yeah, they were for sure built, quote, badly on purpose. And I think there's definitely a special kind of tragic to that. When Dorian meets these bots and he interacts with them and he realizes that a part of him is in them, but they dialed it all the way down to make these sex bots that much more pliable, for lack of a better word.
I would say unaware.
Yes.
And I know when you and I were watching it, there was definitely like a drugged moment. And I think you described it as like this childlike quality where they're just checked out. And I don't know if that's a mercy or not. I don't really know. There's a part of me that wants to say it's a mercy because, yeah, maybe, if you could build a robot that would be able to check out and you wouldn't, quote unquote, hurt any human beings.
Hurt anything
and then you
in their minds. Hurt anyone in their minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You wouldn't hurt a living thing. God, it felt weird saying that.
Oh, I know. There's a real ick factor to quite a bit of this episode if you think about it just a little bit too hard.
Yeah, I don't recommend it. I don't recommend thinking about it too hard. We have probably already thought about it too hard.
We have.
There is a part of me that wants to understand, because I think in the year of our Lord 2021, there is a whole different conversation about the sex industry than there was even in 2013 that we're sort of having now, where it's like, if you could regulate the sex industry, it would probably be a lot safer. And if you could legalize a lot of the things that go on in the sex industry, more regulation, sure, but there would also be checks and balances, and there would be, it takes a government who is sympathetic and who understands the ins and outs and who treats it like an industry instead of like this illegal thing that people do in the shadows.
Right.
I do think it's a very interesting topic that they brought up and then dropped.
Totally. Their general attitude towards the sex industry in this show isn't really pinned down. It's weirdly something that the characters feel comfortable talking about in the workplace. Like, oh, we call them bang bots. They love it, just kind of kicking around it in the middle of the workspace with their boss present. So clearly it's acceptable, I suppose. There's a whole bar full of 40 sex bots where you can just go and find sex bots whenever you would like to find one. There's a whole hotel of rooms that you can bring the sex bots into.
The bad guys in this episode, the Albanian Consortium, it's a little hard to know how far their reach goes.
Yes.
There is a part of me, though, I love your theory that they own the hotel. There's a part of me, though, that they would have looked into who owned the hotel and it would have led them to the Albanian Consortium faster. Unless it's a shell corporation, which is very possible.
But, the two tech industry people, Lorenzo and Sebastian Jones, are both regarded in the show as legitimate businessmen.
Right.
They say that. Oh, these are legitimate businessmen. He has 23 patents. He was the one who created the artificial blush. Like, they're respected individuals. So it's just this weird kind of cognitive dissonance that keeps creeping into the show, probably to your point, because it was made in 2013. And it kind of, there are moments where Valerie kind of sniggers at the fact that, and we'll get into this, where Valerie kind of sniggers at the fact that Kennex has a dating profile.
Has a dating profile
Meanwhile,
in the year of our Lord 2048.
In 2048, that isn't so. In 2021, that isn't something that you would snigger at. There are single people I know who have 5 dating profiles because why not? Cast a wide net.
There are commercials on Hulu,
yes,
which are advertising several dating profiles as we speak.
Yeah, to your point, I think some of it probably came out of when the show was written.
Yeah, some of it suffers from when it was written. I do think they try to talk about it in a way that makes sense for a 42-minute episode. Like, we can't spend that much time on it because that's ultimately not the story they're telling. They're not really telling the story of the sex bots. They're really telling the story of these women who were abducted.
Yes, that's fair. That's fair. And the story of our favorite buddy cop pair.
Oh, my God.
Dorian and John Kennex. Who,
yes,
shall we discuss?
For the fans who ship them call them Jorian, which is very precious.
Yes.
Although I have to tell you, I, in my head, have started calling them Synth Pride.
I love it. Synth Pride. We may be using Synth Pride as their couple name on this podcast. Or
we might. I come up with so many different names. I also liked Robotic Hearts.
I love Robotic
Hearts. That I sort of floated at you. Where I was just like, but what about Robotic Hearts?
But what if?
Okay, they each have robotic aspects.
We have to talk about Synth Pride / Jorian / Robotic Hearts. Because this episode, episode 1, the pilot of Almost Human, had precisely one half joke. And then we get to episode 2. The first time we see Jorian or synth pride, we get this kinky...
I'm really trying not to laugh at Jorian. Look, Jorian's really cute. If you called them Jorian when it was on air, I'm not gonna give you any flack for that. I do think we can do better, though. What would you call them? What would you call them now in 2021?
Ooh, yes, excellent question. Please write us and let us know. What in 2021 would you call John Kennex and Dorian? The first time they're introduced, we get this kicky, funky background music, and we immediately get this 180 between the pilot and this episode, where the pilot, it was still, John, I hate you because you're an android, and then all of a sudden we have banter and jokes.
The tonal shift is intense. I think you also brought this up when we were talking about it. It happens like right after the murder.
Yes.
So all of a sudden we get this, like we get this very buddy cop feel. And there are these teenagers hanging around a crime scene because, of course, you're a teenager. What else are you going to do? One of them recognizes Dorian and goes, hey, are you a bot? And it's just very excited, like, oh, my God, you're a bot. And Dorian goes, yeah, I am. And he's like, what can you do? And he like turns on his processor and you get to see the little blue lights working. They're like, cool.
I love that moment. Dorian is just dripping with charm, winning everyone over.
In his element.
And then you get the other half of our dear robotic hearts.
Kennex, and as an adult, yes, I found this funny. As a child, I would find it horrifying. They're like, oh, yeah, you're human. What can you do? And Kennex goes, oh, just watch. Takes out a pocket knife and stabs his synthetic leg. And does this, like, because it's Carl Urban, I'm just like, of course you did this. And it just, like, does a little ta-da motion.
Ta-da! It was so good.
And the kids start screaming because they're kids.
Because they just saw a man stab his leg with a knife.
And, John is trying to smooth it over as these other rando cops come out of nowhere to, like, whisk away these children of, like, oh, crime scene, nothing to see here, nothing to see. And John is like, but my leg is, like, it's a robot, it's synthetic,
everything fine. And here's where we also get the first time I noted John and Dorian communicate telepathically, quote.
Yes.
Because they don't have to say anything to each other. John looks at Dorian and Dorian looks at John, and Dorian does this great little shake of his head with this mile-wide disapproving stare.
It's the perfect slow shake. Mm-hmm. Which makes me feel so bad for Kennex. And Kennex, like, at least has the wherewithal to be a little bit sheepish about it. Because, like, I'm sure he didn't want to make kids scream.
That wasn't his intent. He doesn't hate children.
He doesn't hate children, but Dorian thinks he does. Dorian was like, I wasn't even born. And I know you don't do that to children. What is wrong with you? And he's like, I thought it would be funny. And he's like, do you have a problem with kids? It's like, no, I don't have a problem with kids. Well, kids can sense electromagnetic fields. And
yes.
I'm just like,
they can sense
what?
Negative energy, man. John, my energy's fine.
My energy's fine. I bet you have a problem with cats too, don't you? Look, this has nothing to do with my problem with cats. Like, what old married couple is this conversation?
It is that's so true. They're just volleying the banter back and forth. And I have to say, as much as it was like whiplash going from the pilot to this, I'm so glad. I'm so happy because I didn't want to see John just hate Dorian for being an android for 13 episodes.
Who would?
Yeah. That's not what I'm here for.
It's not what I'm here for. I didn't sign up for that.
No.
I mean, I signed up for this. And in a way that does make sense to be like, show this side to the audience to endear them a little bit faster. Mm-hmm. But also, it's so fast.
Wait. Speaking of things one didn't sign up for. Was that a good segue? Did I do it?
It was a great segue. Top marks. Good job. It's true. Dorian signs up John Kennex for a dating profile on a website. Capricorn who loves danger.
I love that when he signs up John, we just see that like little blue across his face, and it's just, now you have a dating profile.
Now you have a dating profile.
Doctor.
You're welcome.
Dr. Richard.
Dr. Richard. This is an old show. There might still be things, but I wonder if there's anything on fanfiction.net or AO3 where it's just like Dr. Richard and his
quiche.
Exploits.
Long walks on the beach. Jazz. Oh,
Loves quiche.
so good quiche.
The quiche always gets me.
The quiche that will presumably be fed to you in bed.
Like, that's the only reason you put quiche on your dating profile, I think. I don't know.
Or it's a morning food. It's kind of a morning food, right?
It's kind of a morning.
A brunch food. Let's call it brunch food.
It's a brunch food. It involves a lot to make a quiche. And my brain is going, I will cook you quiche, which, you know, in my brain is like worlds better than like enjoys quiche. It's just like
Enjoys quiche.
enjoys quiche.
Now, I think that what I also like about this episode of the show is that they have all of these kicky banter moments, as we keep calling them, but they also have these really intense heart-to-hearts that John and Dorian get to have as they're in the car, kind of moving from horrific location to horrific location.
Yeah. This episode, the reason we're not doing a plot summary as we did in the pilot for this episode is because, oh boy, did a lot of stuff happen.
So much.
So we recommend watching the episode.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then hanging out with us for a bit because we're going to need to gloss over so much. Their heart-to-hearts are some of the best nonsense I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of it is that, you know, you have Dorian who, I mean, for all intents and purposes, literally a robot who will, like, never die of old age.
Yeah.
And you have him sort of being like, what do you tell a child when someone dies?
Right.
Kennex has to be like, well, you tell a child what you tell everyone, which is what they need to hear, of like, they're in a better place. Mm-hmm. It's like, but you don't know they're in a better place. It's like, but that's not the point. You tell them something that's nice.
Yes. And he says it, I think, it almost sounds like he's translating it to robot language. Because the way Kennex explains it is that this phrase, they're in a better place, was designed to give hope and comfort and to ease pain.
That is 100% what that phrase was used for. I think Kennex really makes that clear to Dorian in as many ways as he can.
Yes. And people believe it because they need to believe it. I love that. I keep on forgetting their names, or mixing up their names is the problem.
Robotic hearts.
Yes, exactly. Two halves of the robotic hearts. When Dorian then comes back and says, wait a minute, but the data that I've studied suggests that the best proof of one's existence is if someone is remembered after they're gone. So he's still kind of trying to push back and say, but wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm.
I think that's also a part of him trying to form his own conclusions and bounce them off someone else who is, in fact, human.
Not immortal.
Quote unquote human. John does his best.
John does his best. He does his best to be a human.
He's a perfectly cromulent human. I do think that moment is very sweet. And then there happens to be a moment where they witness a somewhat brutal autopsy of one of the sex bots. And this is where we get Rudy with his very caring language of like actually being the person who correctly genders the sex bot and doesn't say it and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it is still a fairly upsetting scene for Dorian. And Dorian's just very quiet in the car. And Kennex is like, you okay?
Yes, he checks in with him.
He checks in.
That is not the Kennex that we saw in the pilot. The Kennex in the pilot would never have checked in with his robot partner.
No, he's not. The Kennex we saw in the pilot is not built for that. It's true, though.
You're right, it is.
So Kennex does check in with him, and then Dorian does the most beautiful thing ever and basically pivots back to the dating profile and gets John to essentially confess that he may or may not be in love with Valerie Shaw.
Yes, that was so good.
What old married couple?
And you were the one who pointed this out to me. I think it's so great because, wait, no. First, we have to talk about testicles.
Yes, first we have to talk about testicles. We'll get to Valerie in a moment. But yeah, Dorian does a full body scan and notices Kennex is a little blocked up. And Kennex is just like, don't you ever scan my balls again. And Dorian just says, copy that. And then there's like 3 seconds of silence. And Kennex goes, well, what does she look like? This person who may or may not have messaged me on this dating profile that you created.
What does she look
like? Dorian plays the like, well, what do you want her to look like?
Brown eyes, so full, average height, I like brunettes. And, Kennex is just thinking about all of his favorite things about women.
And I want her to be smart.
Smarter than him.
Smarter than me. That won't be hard. And then, without missing a beat, Dorian is just like, you do realize you described Valerie Stahl, like, to a T. And then, like clockwork, Valerie clicks in of like, hey, I've got a lead on those people you're looking for. And Kennex super awkwardly is like, yeah, 10-4. Good, buddy. Thanks. And then Dorian does a seamless impression of Kennex being awkward as hell.
Absolutely perfect impression.
It's amazing.
Then we get one of these moments that I love. One of those mirror moments between the pilot and episode 1 because, in keeping with this old couple sort of way they have about them, Kennex goes, shut up, shut it, zip it. And it's so tonally different from him saying shut up to the androids in the pilot.
In episode 1, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's completely different. And Dorian, for the most part, doesn't listen at all and just keeps going. Which is, I think, also how you know that Kennex has grown as a person because he didn't shove Dorian out the door while it was driving.
That's also, a really good point.
He doesn't shove Dorian out of the car. Good job, Kennex. The bar is so low.
So low.
But can we also talk real quick about Kennex's driving? Because, wow, the man weaves in and out of traffic, like, constantly. And I think you pointed this out, where it's like, but these long, soulful looks at each other.
I love their long, soulful looks, and I do not want the long, soulful looks to go away. But they are wildly unsafe.
They are wildly unsafe. There are so many moments when Kennex is not even looking at the road.
Not even close.
A little bit. And the hilarious thing is, inside the car, he could have an elbow out that, like he could just be chill as heck. And then you watch the little car zoom in and out of traffic on the wide view. And I'm like, how fast are you going? What is happening right now? And yes, the Dorian Vanessa scene is one of the saddest points in the entire episode.
Oh, truly.
Vanessa is one of the sex bots. And she is probably the one that we spend the most time with. And she has just a lot going on for her. Like she's feeling emotions that she doesn't necessarily know what they are. Mm-hmm. She misses her friend sex bot, like the redhead from the very first scene. Charlene, which is such a great name for a sex bot. I love that. Mm-hmm. I feel like many a country song was written about Charlene.
Oh, I'm sure. And Dorian literally has to explain that feeling to her when she realizes that she misses her friend Charlene.
Vanessa is where we sort of get that childlike.
Oh, very.
Where she definitely has no idea what's going on. And they eventually have to deactivate all these sex bots because they can't have a sex bot walking around with human DNA, which makes sense.
Yes.
But it's still difficult, especially knowing what we know about the sex bots, that they were basically given a broken synthetic soul where they know just enough to be reactive and not necessarily have their own opinions and feelings.
Yeah.
And then you have to reconcile that with, like, we're probably deactivating you for the rest of your existence. And it was very touching.
It's
and
so
I cried.
touching.
I'm pretty sure I cried the first time I watched it.
Oh, I absolutely cried the first time I watched this episode. Granted, I cry in almost everything. I cried in every single Lord of the Rings movie. I cried at the beginning of Finding Nemo when the mom died. And we knew the mom for all of 5 seconds. It's an animated fish and they stopped drawing it and I was in tears. But no, I think that I think that part of the reason this is so heartbreaking is that Dorian in the scene as they're deactivating her, they just keep panning to his face and how torn up he is seeing this happen. And I don't know, he's probably getting all tied up in it because he's thinking, you know, am I real? Do I really exist? Does my life have purpose? And then he's seeing this piece of tech that has bits of him in it being deactivated without ritual, without a plum. This isn't a funeral. It's
one tech in a room that basically injects something into her and then her processor stops.
Yeah.
And, you know, Dorian, to his credit, like, stays the entire time and tells her, like, I will remember you.
Yes.
Even though I don't think she fully understood what that meant. But that's also fine.
No, she did not. And maybe, I don't know.
Maybe it's good that she doesn't know. Don't pay any attention to the man behind the curtain.
Oh,
don't
man.
look too hard.
I love Michael Ealy in this scene.
Yeah. Michael Ealy plays this for everything that it's worth. And I do think this goes back to, you know, Dorian is such a meaty character. You can do so much with him. And I think Michael Ealy is playing it in such a way that you feel for Dorian in every single scene he's in. Mm-hmm. Whether he's being funny or not.
Whether he's using his little flashing lights to charm children, or he's seeing a person die for all intents and purposes.
I feel like you may have also cried when Kennex said he didn't like cats. Did you cry?
There was certainly a tear shed there. A different kind of tear, though. There's a different duct for those tears.
There's a separate duct for the, how could you not love cats?
Separate duct.
Completely. It's just underneath the eyelid.
Yep. And, you know, I think that is about the end of the episode. They solve the case, you know, they
solve the case. They save the women.
The little boy is reunited with his mother.
Yes.
High fives all around, which I think brings us to our one more thing.
One more thing.
If you, Joy, could discuss one more thing about this episode, what would that one more thing be?
I think my one more thing is how awkward Rudy is with Vanessa. He's so awkward.
Yeah.
And he, you know, because he does view Vanessa as a person. And there's definitely a moment of, like, they have to, like, turn something on in Vanessa and, like, double check a GPS thing. So he basically has to, like, hook something into her, and he hasn't deactivated her for it. So it's just kind of like, I need to insert my, nope, that's worse. You know, and, like, he has to kind of, like, cradle her. And there's a moment where he's like, oh, you're friendly. And I'm just like, Rudy.
Because she keeps on trying to engage him in her romantic advances because this is what she's designed to do.
This is what she's designed to do. She doesn't have any other primary objective. Like, this is her driving force. And Rudy is just so unprepared for this scenario, I think, in so many ways. And so that is my one more thing.
Your one more thing. Okay. Well.
What is your one more thing, Danielle?
Well, my one more thing is, I'm cheating a little bit. My one more thing is actually two more things that I found a clever way of rolling into one. I did want to call out this episode as having a few instances of when the old school tech is better. And I guess actually this came up in the pilot too, because, you know, when all of the other MXs are deactivated, Dorian isn't. And he literally says, oh, sometimes old tech isn't, sometimes new tech isn't better. But in this episode, Valerie comes up with this idea because the police force is so lost in this case. How could we possibly track these criminals? They have these tag scramblers on their cars. And Valerie calls and goes, wait a minute, what if we just looked for a silver sedan? What if we just, in a 3-block radius, found a silver sedan and then followed the silver sedan on the traffic cams? And so they do, and that's how they end up finding the criminals. Which brings me to kind of my second point, which is, I think Valerie had some really great moments in this episode. I want more of the moments where she gets to be good at her job, because she is one of the only people, I guess with the exception of Dorian, who can take all of this data and bring it together and come up with a conclusion that makes sense and pushes the case forward. And I want to see more of that, and hopefully less of her as just the love interest, you know?
Valerie happens to be a genius.
Yes.
So it's very difficult to be like, have her reduced to, and we're going to see this again and again because female characters, am I right? But like, it's so difficult to have female characters who are smart.
Yeah.
There's a thing about Valerie, which I don't want to spoil for you, but it comes up later like, no, she is literally smart. Like she's a she's a smarty, smart. Valerie not being that way and just reduced to like some kind of piece of meat.
Yeah.
In an episode about pieces of meat is unfortunate.
Unfortunate. It's a special level of terrible.
I strongly dislike it.
Me too. And I hope the show goes in a different direction for her or just allows her to be more than that, even if they are going to make her the love interest. You know, it can be a both and situation. What if it was both and, you know, and not just one?
Yeah. I do think there's, I would be very interested to hear what you think about Valerie going forward because she has some very interesting episodes, although I think they're later in the season.
Oh, okay.
But we'll get there.
We'll get there. We will. And, yeah.
I think that covers it.
I think that covers it. I think we did it. Well, you know what? Between now and then, we would love to hear from you. You can check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question. Now, we've run ourselves into kind of a corner here because now we have 2 questions.
Oh, now we do have 2 questions. Okay, listeners, you have the choice between these 2 questions because I think they're both good questions, and I will accept both.
Okay, you may either answer the question, if you had a small animatronic animal on your desk, what animal would it be? Or you can answer the question, if you could come up with a couple name for John and Dorian, what couple name would it be? Or do you love Dorian? Maybe you love Dorian. Tell us you love it and tell us why. Of course, you can always email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com.
Yes, and you should tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the small animatronic beings in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.
Bye.